On the edge of a quiet old town, some stories don't sleep, they wait. And when the right person arrives, they wake. Stay till the end to discover the truth hidden beneath Ashford Hill. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because what you're about to hear might change how you see forgotten places forever. John Lewis had lived in Ashford Hill his entire life. But the town never felt like home, not really. It was one of those places where the air always carried something unsaid. The kind of silence that felt older than the streets themselves. The houses leaned slightly toward each other, as if whispering secrets that no one else was meant to hear. And the hill, the tall, dark ridge that stood behind the town, cast a shadow that stretched farther than it should have. John wasn't a man who believed in stories. He believed in work, in routine, in things he could touch. But the town had legends, and he heard them all growing up, about an old underground tunnel beneath the hill, sealed before John's grandfather was born. Some said it led to the ruins of an estate that burned down decades ago. Others insisted it was built to hide something, or someone. For most of his life, John ignored it, until the day the ground slipped beneath his feet. It happened after a week of heavy rain. The soil near the base of the hill had softened, and as John walked past on his way home from the old workshop, he felt the earth groan, a deep, hollow sound beneath the surface. Before he could move, the ground broke open. John stumbled backward, heart pounding, as a large section of the hillside collapsed into a dark pit. When the dust settled, he saw it. A stone archway, half buried, ancient, sealed by a rusted iron gate twisted by time. It shouldn't have been there. Not this close to the town. Not this intact. John felt the hairs on his neck rise. Something about that opening looked wrong. Not dangerous, just deliberate. Like someone had once worked hard to make sure it stayed hidden. He stepped closer. The stones around the arch were carved with lines, faint but recognizable. Symbols maybe, circles, dashes, something like initials but too worn to read. The gate was chained shut, though the chain looked as old as the arch itself. John reached out, brushing the dust off the metal. It was cold, unnaturally cold, even for that rainy morning. He heard footsteps behind him and turned quickly. Mrs. Alden, the elderly woman who lived nearest to the hill, stood clutching her coat tight around her shoulders. Her eyes, usually tired and soft, were wide with fear. "You shouldn't be near that," she whispered. John frowned. "You know what this is?" She looked at the tunnel, then away, as if seeing it hurt. It should have stayed buried, for everyone's sake. John tried to ask more, but she shook her head and hurried back toward her house, almost stumbling in her rush. Her reaction should have scared him away. Instead, it pulled him closer. The rain began again, slow and cold. John stayed where he was, staring into the darkness behind the iron bars. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel something. The same strange pressure in the air he felt during storms. A heaviness, a memory. Then he noticed something wedged between the stones near the bottom of the arch. A small, round object. He crouched and pried it free. It was a metal pendant, tarnished and scratched, but engraved with a name he knew too well. Eleanor. His mother's name. The mother who vanished when John was only 8. The tunnel wasn't just an old legend. It was connected to him, and to a past the town never wanted him to uncover. John stood slowly, the pendant shaking in his hand. Whatever was sealed behind that gate was waiting for him. John Lewis stood frozen at the base of Ashford Hill, the worn metal pendant still trembling in his hand. The rain slid down his face, mixing with the heat rising behind his eyes. Eleanor, his mother's name, carved into an object that had been trapped inside a sealed tunnel no one in town wanted to talk about. He stared at the engraving again, just to make sure he wasn't imagining it. But the letters were clear, unevenly scratched, as if made in a hurry, or with shaking hands. He slipped the pendant into his coat pocket and stepped back from the gate. Part of him wanted to run home and lock the door. Another part, the part that had spent a lifetime wondering why his mother disappeared, refused to move. The storm grew heavier, the wind pushing against him as if trying to force him away from the arch. But John stayed. His thoughts raced. His mother vanished when he was a child, but the police never found anything. No trace, no clue, no answers. And his father never spoke of it again. Not once, not even when John begged. He called it an accident, a tragedy, something children should forget. But John never forgot, because some nights, he could still hear her voice in his dreams calling his name, then fading away. Now the pendant, something she had always worn, appeared inside a tunnel sealed long before he was born. It didn't make sense. And yet, deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A direction. For the first time, the past wasn't just a memory. It was a path. John took one last look at the stone archway before turning toward the town. He needed answers. And there was only one person who might still know something. Mrs. Alden. The way she looked at the tunnel, it wasn't surprise. It was recognition. Fear born from memory, not imagination. He hurried through the muddy slope toward her old wooden house. The windows glowed dimly, the curtains half drawn, as if the house itself didn't want the outside world to see what lived inside. John knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door cracked open just enough for her tired eyes to appear. "I told you to stay away," she said, her voice small but sharp. John didn't push the door. He just stood there, soaked and shivering. "That tunnel," he said quietly. "You knew what it was. You knew before I said anything." Mrs. Alden swallowed hard. Her gaze shifted, not to John, but to the hill behind him. "It's not a tunnel," she whispered. "It's a holding place. A place that was supposed to stay closed." "For what?" John asked. "What's down there?" She hesitated. The silence stretched long enough for John to hear the rain dripping from the gutters onto her porch. "People," she finally answered. "People who weren't meant to be found." John felt the floor tilt beneath him. "My mother?" he asked, his voice cracking. Mrs. Alden shut her eyes. Her lips trembled, and he could see the weight of decades pressing on her thin shoulders. "I can't say," she whispered, "but I can tell you this. When they sealed that place, they didn't do it because they wanted to protect the town from what was inside." She took a breath. "They did it because they wanted to protect what was inside from the town." John's heartbeat stumbled. "Who sealed it?" he asked. She shook her head. "You need to speak to Father Rowan. He's the only one left who knows the truth. And even he won't want to talk." John clenched his fists. "Then I'll make him." Mrs. Alden finally opened the door a little wider. Her eyes softened, not with pity, but with despair. "John," she said quietly, "some doors are sealed because opening them costs more than you can pay." He didn't answer. He turned away and walked into the rain, his jaw tight, the pendant pressing cold against his chest. He wasn't paying attention to the hill anymore, so he didn't notice the faint tremor, or the way the tunnel gate, chained for almost a century, shifted slightly inward, as if something inside had heard him. John Lewis kept walking deeper into the tunnel, the cold air tightening around his lungs. This wasn't just a tunnel. It felt like every mistake he'd buried, every fear he'd run from, finally catching up to him. He moved with his hands brushing the rough walls, each step reminding him he didn't come this far to go back to the same life he was slowly dying in. He remembered the nights he stared at ceilings, wondering why nothing he touched ever worked out. But here, inside this endless, echoing darkness, he wasn't allowed to hide behind excuses. The ground shifted under him, and for a second, panic shot up his spine. The tunnel narrowed. He felt trapped, pinned between who he used to be and who he had to become. The old John would have turned around, convinced the universe was against him. But this version, the version forged by disappointment, pressure, and failure, kept moving. Because he finally understood the truth. If life placed him in the tunnel, it meant the exit existed somewhere ahead. But getting there required the one thing he'd avoided his whole life: endurance. The tunnel pressed tighter around John Lewis, the ceiling dropping low enough that he had to bow his head to keep moving. Every scrape of stone against his shoulders felt like a judgment passed on the years he wasted waiting for perfect timing. Down here, there was no timing, only choices. Move or stay stuck, grow or decay. He kept pushing, even as his knees brushed the dirt and his palms stung. The narrow passage wasn't trying to stop him. It was testing whether he deserved the life he kept imagining but never fought for. His breath grew heavier, echoing back at him in uneven waves. The deeper he crawled, the more his mind tried to pull him back to memories of quitting, jobs, goals, promises, even people. But something inside him had shifted. Quitting wasn't an option now. Not after seeing what his old life cost him. Not after realizing that nobody was coming to save him. He whispered to himself, not a prayer, not hope, just a command. Forward. And with that single word, he dragged himself through the tightest part of the passage, refusing to let the darkness dictate who he would become. The narrow passage suddenly ended. John Lewis felt the ground vanish beneath his hand, and his body froze. A silent drop stretched in front of him, an empty space swallowed in blackness. No markers, no edges, no guarantee that a bottom even existed. It reminded him of every risk he had avoided in his life, every opportunity he backed away from because he was terrified of falling. And now here he was, facing the physical version of the same fear he'd carried for years. He sat there in the dirt, heartbeat pounding in his ears, realizing that the tunnel wasn't the real enemy. His hesitation was the same hesitation that cost him dreams, relationships, time he could never reclaim. He reached out, fingers searching the darkness, and felt a faint ledge. Not stable, not safe, but enough. He tightened his jaw, shifted his weight forward, and let himself drop onto it. His feet hit the stone hard, but he didn't fall. For the first time in years, he took a risk, and survived it. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but he survived. And that was enough to keep him going. John steadied himself on the narrow ledge. The air here felt different. Thicker, warmer, almost like something was breathing with him. He pressed his palm against the wall, and the stone wasn't cold anymore. It pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat buried deep inside the earth. For a moment, he pulled his hand away, thinking it was just exhaustion playing tricks on him. But when he touched it again, the pulse returned, slow, steady, deliberate. That's when he noticed the grooves. Not natural, not erosion, carved. Lines and curves forming shapes he didn't understand, but arranged with intention. Someone had been here long before him. Someone who wanted this place to be found, but only by the person willing to crawl through darkness and face their fear. And the realization shook him. This wasn't random. The tunnel wasn't just a trap or a cave. It was built, designed, waiting. The pulse grew stronger beneath his hand, and a low vibration trembled through the wall. Not dangerous, almost inviting, as if the tunnel itself acknowledged him, accepted him. For a man who'd spent years feeling invisible in the world above, this strange acknowledgement hit harder than he expected. Something knew he was here. Something wanted him to continue. A faint click echoed from somewhere deeper ahead. He lifted his head. The path wasn't just calling him, it was opening. John froze as that soft click echoed again, closer this time, sharper, like gears shifting behind stone. He held his breath. Nothing in the tunnel so far had felt mechanical, but this was the sound of something waking up, something old, something patient. He stepped forward carefully, keeping one hand on the breathing wall. The stone's pulse synced with his own heartbeat now, slow, steady, grounding him. Ahead, the darkness seemed to ripple, not like shadow, but like a curtain stirred by wind. But there was no wind down here, not a single current of air, just that strange rhythmic vibration. Then the wall beside him shuddered. A seam appeared where there had been only solid rock. Dust spilled out. The stone shifted, slow at first, then with purpose. A narrow passage opened, carved with the same symbols he'd seen earlier, but sharper, deeper, glowing faintly with a muted gold light. The glow didn't feel electric or violent. It felt ancient, like fire trapped inside stone. John hesitated. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But another truth cut through louder. He'd come too far for fear to make the choice now. He stepped into the passage. The air changed instantly, warmer, cleaner, almost like standing inside a memory. The walls were smooth, perfectly cut, as if carved not by tools, but by intention. His footsteps sounded different here. Not echoes, responses. As if the tunnel answered him, step by step. He ran his fingers along the glowing markings. They weren't just symbols. They were a story. A path someone else had taken long before him. A warning, or a guide. He couldn't tell. But one thing was certain. This place wasn't reacting to anyone. It was reacting to him. And whatever waited deeper inside, already knew he was coming. John followed the warm glow deeper until the tunnel widened abruptly into a chamber. Perfectly circular, perfectly silent, perfectly wrong. The moment he stepped inside, the light behind him faded, sealing the passage shut with a low, heavy thud. No door, no seam, just smooth stone. The place had swallowed him whole. He swallowed hard and lifted the lantern. The room was enormous, but every inch looked carved with impossible precision. No cracks, no rough edges, no sign of age despite the dust. In the center stood a single upright slab of stone, taller than him, shaped almost like a gravestone but far more deliberate. Symbols spiraled across its surface in patterns that looked familiar, too familiar. He approached slowly, then he froze. Right in the center of the slab, written in clear, deliberate English, was a name. John Lewis. He staggered back, his pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't erosion. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. Someone, something, had carved his name before he ever set foot in this tunnel. Long before he was born. He forced himself closer, breath shaking. Below his name, new lines of text appeared, literally formed before his eyes. The stone shifted, rippled like wet ink solidifying. Words carved themselves as if an invisible hand dragged a chisel across the surface. They formed a sentence. You were always meant to stand here. John's skin went cold. The room wasn't just ancient. It was conscious. He touched the slab. The stone warmed instantly under his fingers. A deep hum vibrated through his bones. Not threatening, not comforting, just inevitable. As if it had been waiting years, centuries, for someone with his pulse, his breath, his exact existence. A sound rose behind him, soft, steady, like footsteps made of air. The room darkened except for the glowing slab. The hum deepened. The ground trembled. Then the slab split open, revealing a hollow interior lit with a swirling, golden mist that moved like storm clouds trapped in a bottle. Inside the slab, something floated. Small, metallic, delicate, a pendant, circular, bronze, etched with the same symbols he'd seen since entering the tunnel. It hung suspended in midair, pulsing with a heartbeat that wasn't his, but might as well have been. Every pulse sent a wave through the room. The air thickened. His vision sharpened unnaturally. He reached toward it, not because he wanted to, but because it felt like the room expected him to. The moment his fingers brushed the pendant, the mist collapsed into the stone. The hum stopped. The chamber inhaled sharply, then spoke. Not in a voice, not in sound, in meaning. A message carved directly into his mind. Now you carry what they could not. The slab sealed shut. The glow vanished. The pendant settled into his palm, warm, heavy, alive. And with it came a truth he could no longer deny. This place didn't find him by accident. It summoned him. John closed his fingers around the pendant, trying to steady his breath, but the room didn't give him a moment. As soon as he turned, the walls shuddered, stone grinding against stone, until a narrow exit revealed itself behind him, sliding open like a mechanical iris. No sound of gears, no metal, just ancient stone moving as if it were alive. He stepped into the passage. It sealed behind him instantly. The new tunnel was tighter, colder, almost claustrophobic. The air tasted metallic, like electricity after lightning. His lantern flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally long along the walls. Something was wrong with the light. Every time the flame dimmed, the shadows didn't dim with it. They stayed dark, solid, almost watching. Halfway down the passage, he felt it. A presence. Not footsteps, not breathing, something deeper, like a pressure pushing against his spine, tracking the movement of his heartbeat. He didn't turn around. He refused to, because whatever was back there didn't want to be seen. He tightened his grip on the lantern and walked faster. But the pressure followed, matched him, mirrored him, learned him. When he sped up, it sped up. When he slowed, it slowed, as if testing him, mapping him. At one point he stopped completely. The thing behind him didn't. It kept moving for one step more. And that told him everything. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't an echo. It was a second presence walking on its own. John's throat tightened. He forced himself forward, refusing to give that thing the reaction it wanted. At the end of the passage, a final archway opened into daylight. Real daylight. A crack of blue sky, salt wind, the surface. He felt a rush of relief and bolted for the exit. But halfway through the archway, he felt a cold fingertip brush the back of his neck. Just one touch, barely there, like a reminder. He stumbled into the open air. The forest clearing outside looked normal, calm, quiet, birdsong, sunlight, but his lungs burned as if he had run from something impossible. He spun around. The tunnel entrance was gone, just solid stone, tangled with roots, as if no cave had ever existed. He stood there in disbelief, gripping the pendant and staring at the blank wall. No seam, no mark, nothing, but the skin on the back of his neck still tingled where the thing had touched him. He wasn't alone. He could feel it. Something had crossed into the world with him. Not fully, not physically, but enough to cling, enough to watch, enough to wait. John took one shaky step back, and the trees around him rustled even though there was no wind. A low vibration moved through the ground, subtle as a breath. Whatever followed him out, it didn't stay behind. It followed him because he took the pendant. And now he understood the worst part. The tunnel hadn't been a prison. It had been a threshold, and he was the first one to walk through it in centuries. John's feet sank into the soft earth outside the tunnel, his chest heaving from the run. But the air didn't bring relief. The forest smelled the same, sunlight dappled the ground, birds sang, but he felt the presence behind his eyes, pressing in. It didn't matter that the tunnel was gone. That thing, whatever it was, had crossed the line with him. He looked down at the pendant. Its metal glinted unnaturally, like it had absorbed the darkness from the tunnel and kept it alive. The carvings, once faint, now seemed to shift in the light, letters dancing just enough to make sense if you stared too long. He swallowed hard. The weight of the centuries pressed on his shoulders. He understood now. Some secrets are alive, and once touched, they never let go. John moved toward the road, each step measured, careful. He needed witnesses, someone to know he hadn't gone insane. But the forest seemed endless, twisting around him, every turn eerily familiar, yet subtly different. Like the land itself remembered the men buried beneath it and had reshaped itself to guard them. The pendant pulsed in his hand, a heartbeat almost audible. It was as if it were guiding him, directing him towards something important, something that could only be seen by those who survived the darkness. Hours passed. Sun dipped low. Shadows lengthened. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, sounded amplified, a warning. He knew the moment the first townspeople would see him, they would notice the fear etched into his face. But fear wasn't the only thing. There was a sense of purpose too. The men in the tunnel had waited, and now it was his turn to carry their story, their final warning, their unspoken plea. When he finally reached the edge of the forest, the first houses of the nearby village came into view. Lights flickered from windows. Dogs barked. Children's laughter. Normal life. John took a long, shuddering breath. For a moment, it felt real, like he had returned from a nightmare that belonged only to him. But he knew better. The pendant hummed faintly in his palm. Something lived in it now. Something patient. Something that had been waiting centuries for someone to step outside the tunnel. John entered the village. He went straight to the town hall, seeking out anyone who would listen. Historians, journalists, even the police. Each explanation he gave sounded unbelievable, yet he spoke with the weight of truth behind every word. The tunnel, the sealed men, the unnatural air, the glinting presence, they had all been real. Some listened with awe, some with skepticism, but all sensed the gravity in his voice. And every time he looked down at the pendant, he remembered the touch on his neck, the way the shadows had walked with him. It wasn't a story one could forget. By evening, he returned to his small rented room, exhausted. The village below glimmered with lights, ordinary life carrying on as if nothing had happened. John held the pendant, staring at it in silence. He had survived the tunnel, survived the presence that crossed into his world, and now carried the legacy of those long-buried men. The weight of history was in his hands, and he knew someday, someone else might follow the path he had taken. And when they did, they would find the same truth. Some thresholds are eternal, some secrets are alive, and some darkness, once touched, never releases its grip. Outside, the wind rustled through the streets, carrying a faint echo, like a whisper from beneath the mountains, soft, patient, eternal. And John Lewis, survivor of the centuries-old tunnel, whispered back, silently promising the men below that their story would not be lost, that the world would remember, that the darkness would not win, at least not entirely. Do you believe that nothing happens by chance? Write in the comments where you're watching from. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead that will touch your heart.